Chardonnay tonight. I've been drinking red lately because it's been cold for summer, and I find for white wine I need to be warm. And so today was actually warm, and I spent the whole day outside with my kiddos. So it's a white wine kind of night. This is Chardonnay. This is Santa Carolina. I didn't grab the bottle, but it's a 2 or a 3, I believe. It's low with sugar. It's delicious, and it's one of my very favorites. So cheers, guys. Let's have a wine break and let's get this party started. Yum. Okay, so I've got my laptop here in front of me so I can get the questions that come up or the comments. I've got you on my phone in front of me, so hopefully between the two of them I can catch any of the comments that come on there. And we're just gonna get going right off the hop. So if you're just joining, we are talking back to basics tonight. We are just gonna talk about getting back into a routine, getting into fat loss, you know, how to eat, what you need to keep in mind, all of those things that matter, which kind of get thrown out the window this time of year, right? Like if you're like me, routine just gets totally pitched out the window by this point in the summer. And I am so thankful that school starts up again next week. I mean, I'm very blessed where I got to have most of the summer off with my kids. It's been fantastic. We've done so many cool things, but at the end of the day, routine is amazing, right? And after 2 months of non-routine, I am so excited to just get back into routine. You know, it's so much easier to plan meals. It's so much easier, you know, when you know what you're going to be doing, you know, during the day, to decide what you're going to have for breakfast and lunch and to have your snacks and to have all of that ready to go. So I'm really excited to get back into routine. And I'm sure you guys are too, which is why September tends to be, we kind of call it the new New Year's in the health and wellness realm. And that's because after the summer where most people just, and myself included, right? You kind of get out of your norms and you get a little bit more lax for most people, not everyone, but most of us. And we kind of eat a little bit worse than we normally do. We might have more cocktails than we normally do. And by the time it ends, you're just kind of, you're craving that reset button. And so September kind of becomes this month now where, you know, it's this fantastic kind of kick in the pants to evaluate where you're at, where your goals are, you know, where you want to be by 2018, right? Like, where do you want to end this year? Because a lot of the times, you know, we start the year off, we start January and we have these big goals, we have these big plans, and, you know, we're just ready to make big changes. And then so September kind of tends to be that gut check where you're going, okay, it's fall. You know, we've only got September, October, November, December. We've got 4 months and we're back to January again. Like, how far did we come with those goals? So I find I get really busy in my personal practice. I get really busy with online clients this time of year, and it's already started. August has been so much busier than it normally even is. So I can feel that shift in the energy of everyone just kind of wanting to get back to it. So if you're just joining, that's what we're talking about. We're going to talk basics of fat loss. We're going to talk about how to get back into it today. I'd love to answer any of your questions. So if you just have random questions that are brewing, type them in. We'll make sure that they do get answered. So if you're on, if you can hear me, let's just do an audio video check. You know, if you can hear me, if you can see me, hit the little like button, hit the thumbs up, type hi in the chat, just so I know I'm not talking to myself, because that's happened before. That would be fantastic. And I see Kathy says, hi Laura, my wine and I are enjoying Wednesday night chat time. Amazing. Cheers, Kathy. Me as well. So, I'm seeing some hearts in there. Perfect. So people can hear me, you can see me. Okay, so if you're new to the page, let's get this going. I'm Laura. I'm a mom of 2, clearly. I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I'm founder of The Lavish Method, where I teach women who just want to lose weight simple way of eating that doesn't involve giving up wine or chocolate, because those are my 2 favorite things in the world, and I call them deal breakers. And so today we are going to talk about the basics of fat loss, right? So if you're new to the page, this might be new to you. If you've been following this page for a while now, it may not be new, but it's probably a great refresher. It's always a great refresher. I love teaching this stuff because it's always a great refresher for me. So if anything comes up that you're unfamiliar with, just go ahead and ask me questions. So let's talk about some of the most important things when it comes to fat loss. So First of all, it's important for you guys to know that fat loss is a hormonal state, right? Fat loss isn't just like energy in, energy out. You know, when we burn up all the energy that we've taken in through food, we just automatically go into a different process and, you know, all those things. There's really complicated hormones that come into play when it comes to fat loss. And so I was doing a talk in Niagara-on-the-Lake last week, which was so lovely. It was a great women's retreat and some amazing women on it. But we were kind of doing this basics talk, like the basics of fat loss, how food works and all of those things. And, you know, it was a real eye-opener for a lot of people. So I'm going to try to give you guys some of that same information because I think it's really, really important. So number one, there's a lot of different hormones involved that come into play when it comes to fat loss. So we're not going to get into all of those because this isn't biology class, right? I'm not teaching you physiology, I'm not teaching you biology, but I want you to have a basic understanding of what goes into fat loss and fat storage. So we're gonna focus on what I call the power hormones, the two hormones that play the biggest role in fat loss and fat burning, right? Fat loss and fat burning, fat loss and fat storage, the two opposites, right? So those hormones are insulin and glucagon. So you may have heard of insulin before. Insulin is basically secreted by the pancreas to take the sugar out of our blood and deliver it to the cells where they can use it as energy. Insulin also is able to tell the liver to make that energy into glycogen or into fat stores if the cells don't need as much energy as we are currently providing, right? So basically, insulin is your fat storage hormone. It delivers energy to the cells if they need it. If they don't need it, it brings it to the liver and says, store this puppy as fat because we don't need it right now, but we might need it later, right? And so that is basically when fat is formed in your body. And so the opposite of that is a hormone called glucagon. And glucagon is basically, we call it insulin's counterpart, right? So what that means is they're always opposite. They're like two different ends of a seesaw. When insulin's high, glucagon's low. When glucagon's high, insulin's low. And they move like this. They don't go like this. They're not both low and both high, right? They're counterparts. They're opposites. And so what glucagon does is glucagon actually goes in, tells those fat cells to release some energy and then to burn that energy as fuel instead of relying on sugar. So that is what you want to be high. You want glucagon to be the star of the show when you're trying to lose fat. The last thing you want to do is have insulin come in, sabotage that show, and then store that fat, right? So that's important to understand when it comes to fat loss, that it's driven by these two specific hormones, insulin and glucagon. So the second thing that you need to understand is that insulin and glucagon are completely dependent for the most part on what you're eating. And notice I'm saying what you're eating. I'm not saying how much you're eating. Hey, Anne, how are you? I'm not saying how much, I'm saying what you're eating, because what you're eating is more important than how much you're eating. And this is huge for most people. It's a game changer for a lot of people because we're so used to that thought philosophy that the less you eat, the more you're going to burn fat. And that's so not true, because that theory, that mindset relies on the fact that when you eat less, the amount of calories burned in a day stays the same, and therefore you dip into fat reserves. And that we know that that's not true. We've known that that's not true for such a long time, and it's crazy that it's still perpetuated out there, because we know that your body is really smart and your body is really adaptive, right? So your body doesn't want to die. And if over time you're continuously taking in less energy than you're expending, eventually that leads to death, right? That's what starvation is. So what your body does is it compensates. So when you're continually taking in less energy than you're expending, your body lowers your basal metabolic rate. It lowers the amount of energy that you use in a day so that you can conserve your stores and so that you don't die, right? And now we know logically that in this day and age, it's very rare for us to die of starvation, us being the people who are watching this video, living in the first world, that's not really a danger, but your body doesn't know that. And so when it comes to, I'm going to back up again. When it comes to those hormones that either store fat or that release fat, it's what you're eating that's more important than how much of it you're eating. So we know, if you've been following this page, the Lavish Nutrition page, if you've been part of my community, for any length of time, you know that food it's made of three things, right? Like food is made up of fat, it's made up of protein, and it's made up of carbohydrates. Like the whole food groups thing is kind of BS when it comes right down to it, right? All food is fat, protein, or carbohydrates. It's either one of those three or it's a combination of those three. Like that's it. Like that's what food is, right? So those three things have very, very different properties when you eat them and when you digest them, and they have very different effects on the hormones we're talking about, on insulin and on glucagon, right? With me so far? I hope you're with me so far. So I'm looking to see if there are any questions and comments. I don't see any. I'm just gonna make sure there's not. It doesn't look like it. Okay, so Kathy says, so what is happening when you are a diabetic? Well, that's when you're, okay, type 1 or type 2. Kathy, this is kind of a side note, but I'm okay with going off on a little bit of a tangent. Type 1 or type 2? I'm assuming type 2. So I'm going to go with type 2 because type 1 diabetes is basically an autoimmune condition where your cells actually attack the beta cells in your pancreas, and then they can't produce insulin anymore, and then we have to supply insulin. So that's type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes usually results from what we call insulin insensitivity. And so what happens, it's actually a really interesting process, and I never quite understood this. But so what happens with type 2 diabetes is usually, and there's different routes to get there, but this is the usual way when it's caused by obesity and you know, precursor is like the metabolic syndrome and all of those things. So basically what happens is that over time, you're flooding your system with insulin because you're eating a ton of sugar. You're eating a ton of processed foods. You're eating a ton of processed carbohydrates specifically, which break down to sugar. And so what happens is that you are basically flooding your system with insulin and your cells become insensitive to it. So a great way to look at this is if you think about you know, when your favorite artist or somebody you really, really like releases a new song, okay? Adele. This is a great one, right? Because Adele didn't release music for so long, right? So she had her smash hit 21 was the CD, I think, right? Where it's all we heard for like 18 months was Adele on the radio, and then she had nothing for like 2 years or 3 years or however long, and then she came out with that song Hello. And I actually had heard somebody else explain it this way, and I thought it was genius, so I'm going to try to explain it this way to you guys. So when Hello came out, everybody was obsessed. It was so exciting. You know, you were hearing Hello all the time, and when it came on the radio, you turn it up, and that was great. And so what happened was it was so popular that the radio kept playing it, and they kept playing it, and they kept playing it. And it got to the point for a lot of people where when that song came on, you wanted to turn it off, right? You weren't receptive to it anymore. You didn't like it anymore because you were overexposed to it, right? And so that's very, very similar to what happens with your cells when they're overexposed to insulin, when you're flooding your system with insulin because you're eating so much sugar, so much processed carbohydrates all the time, is that your cells become insensitive to it. And so your body has to keep making more and more and more. And this is why you store so much more fat because you're constantly making more insulin, and it basically ends up leading to type 2 diabetes. That's the main route to type 2 diabetes for a lot of people. And so what we do in those cases is it's really important to lower that processed carbohydrate, lower that sugar that you're constantly exposed to, get the insulin down, right? Because much like when that song is being played over and over and over again and you want to shoot yourself every time you hear it, right? You become completely insensitive to it, you don't like it anymore. What happens is that when you don't hear it for a long time, you know, maybe you go like 2-3 months without hearing it on the radio, which is great. And then all of a sudden you hear it and you're like, oh, yeah, this is a great song. Why did I not like this song? And that's what can happen with your cells too, right? Is that you're able to resensitize them, like to get them back to where they should be. And this is why for a lot of people, they are able to reverse type 2 diabetes, right? Because with diet, with dietary changes, because they're able to basically reverse that insulin insensitivity that's taking place. I hope that makes sense. And so that was a little bit of a side note. So I'm hoping you guys followed that. Let's go back. I kind of alluded to this next part though in that whole explanation there. So let's go back a little bit and let's talk about the 3 macronutrients. So fat, protein, and carbs, which are basically what all food is made of. And Kathy, if that makes sense to you, oh, thanks. Okay, so I'm assuming that you don't need more clarification. So that's good. So when it comes down to how those 3 different macronutrients digest, they digest really, really differently, right? So carbohydrates, like I just talked about, kind of break down to sugar. That's the base of what they're made of. They're made of sugar, and they're very, very easy for your body to digest, and they're easy energy for your body to use. And so what happens with carbohydrates is we digest them quickly, we send a flood of sugar into our system, and then insulin comes in. So when we eat carbohydrates, we get an insulin spike, insulin comes in, it delivers that energy to the cells, or else it then stores it as fat if the cells don't need that energy, which happens quite frequently, right? With fat and protein, they digest down to different things. So they don't digest down to sugar, and they take a lot longer to digest. And so they don't have these associated insulin spikes that go along with them, which is really, really important to note. So basically, when it comes right down to it, when we want to lose fat, we want to reduce the insulin, because insulin is the hormone that tells us to store fat. So we want to reduce the insulin. We want to increase the glucagon, which means we want to reduce our reliance on, carbohydrates, on the processed foods, on the sugars, on the things that digest quickly and spike insulin and cause fat storage. And we want to focus on the fats, right? Because fat is the slowest to digest. Fat actually causes a hormone called CCK to be released from your small intestine, and that hormone actually goes in and it tells your stomach to slow down its emptying, to slow down digestion even more, so your body can have ample time to break down and process the fat in the small intestine, which is amazing. It keeps you feeling fuller longer. It's slowing down that rate of digestion, which slows down any blood sugar spike, which is super important, right? And then it allows for the hormone glucagon to actually be high throughout the day, because insulin is kept low, which is really important. And then with protein, protein's great in keeping to like a moderate amount, right? Because protein is a building block molecule. It's the macro that helps to build things, right? But protein is also something that creates thermogenesis. So protein is a really complicated, like very intricate little molecule that basically has a lot of bonds involved. So when you digest it, when your body works to break it down, it has to work really, really hard, because it's hard to digest. And so what happens is that when your body works hard, it creates heat, which is what thermogenesis means, heat creating. And that means you burn more calories and you increase your metabolic rate. So it's really important to space your protein out so you're having good protein from the get-go, right? Protein in the morning, protein at lunch, protein at dinner. You want to have protein at every meal, because when you have protein at every meal, you are literally making your body work harder all the time. You're increasing that metabolic rate, which is super important, and you're basically burning as many calories as possible while you're eating. Okay, I'm gonna have a wine break because I felt like that got really intense there. Macros are very intense. It's very important that you know your macros and you know what they do, because that's what fat loss comes down to, right? Like, that is what it is. It's knowing which foods cause which hormones to be in abundance, which foods cause your blood sugar to be stable, which foods cause insulin spikes, which foods are going to work for you when it comes to fat loss, or conversely, the foods that are going to work against you. And again, here, wine break. I'm going to actually have a wine break. And what's really interesting and what's really important to note is that, healthy foods, like traditionally healthy foods, don't necessarily mean that they're good for fat loss, right? Just because a food is packed with, lots of different vitamins and minerals, and just because a food has, that kind of stuff going for it, it doesn't mean that it supports hormonal fat loss. It doesn't mean that it doesn't, but it doesn't mean that it does. So one of my favorite examples in this is overnight oats, okay? Overnight oats have had their moment to shine for a while now. If you go on Pinterest, you find recipe after recipe for overnight oats packed with, good sugars like maple syrup and lots of different fruit, maybe some jam in there. Some of them have chocolate chips and bananas and all of these healthy foods, like natural sugars and fruit and oats and all of these things, yogurt maybe put in there. And so I thought overnight oats were the healthiest thing in the world, but when it comes right down to it, it's basically pure carbohydrates. The more stuff you add, the higher the sugar content goes, the higher the carb content goes, right? So many of us are getting up in the morning and, we're trying to lose fat and, we're trying to eat healthy and we're trying to do all the things. And so we have a big jar of overnight oats, and then we get in our car and we drive to work and we sit at our desk all day. And that amount of sugar in the morning, when you're not actually active, when you don't need it, is outrageous, right? Like it's ludicrous. Like it just gets stored as fat. And so this is why it's so important to match your goals with the food that you're eating, right? And your lifestyle. Because for somebody that I just described, somebody sitting at a desk, you know, who is getting up in the morning, having breakfast, getting in their car, going to work, and, you know, you're not super active. You might be up and walking a bit, but you're not, you know, out there doing a strength-based workout. You're not out there, you know, going for a run, whatever you're doing. It's going to be very different for those people than for somebody who, say, gets up in the morning, has overnight oats, and then goes and does a 30-minute high-intensity interval training workout with their trainer, right? Like, that's totally different. So it's really important that you take, you know, what your day involves, that you take your activity level, that you take, you know, your goals, and then you match that to what you're eating. And you don't just blindly follow the healthy eating trends if you're trying to lose weight or if you're trying to tone up or whatever your goals are, right? Because it doesn't all match up. It's not that easy. It'd be amazing if it was that easy, but it's totally not that easy. And so I think that's a good segue. Let's see how we're at for time. 8:15. Okay, so we're doing pretty good for time. So I think that's a good segue too into you know, when we talk about the traditional diet foods and why they don't work, because again, we're getting back to basics tonight. So I want to cover the bases of the back to basic stuff. Holy, that's hard to say. Say it 3 times fast, right? So we covered the hormones, right? So insulin and glucagon. You want insulin to be low and steady. You want glucagon to be nice and high if you want to be able to burn off that stored fat, burn up those leftovers that are sitting at the back of the fridge, aka your body, and get them out of there, right? So that's key. You want to do that by matching the macronutrients to your activity level and to your goals, right? So you know that the 3 macros, fat, protein, and carbs, are what make up food. They all digest differently. They all promote different things, right? So it's important that you're able to match those to what you want to achieve. And then it's also important that you don't fall for the healthy eating crap and the calorie crap, right? So we talked a little bit about healthy eating crap, and it's not, I shouldn't say it like that, but it's just so frustrating, right? Because I get people coming in all the time, right? Women who are just so frustrated because they're spending a fortune on like healthy foods, right? They feel like they're doing everything. They're spending all of their time in Pinterest trying to find recipes and things that they should be eating. And I mean, it's all BS because these foods don't support the goals that they want, right? They don't support the lifestyle that they're living. Nobody's saying this stuff. So it's really important that you know that. And then so on the other side of that coin, it's really important that you don't fall for the BS when it comes to the weight loss foods, right? And like the 100-calorie snack packs, which are the bane of my existence, the protein bars, the meal replacement bars, you know, things like that have all of the right words on the outside label. You think, oh, 100 calories, perfect, I need a snack, this is great. But at the end of the day, when you actually look at what's in that 100 calories, it's 100 calories of processed carbohydrates that are gonna break down to sugar, spike your insulin, and cause fat storage, boom, like that, right? Like, that's what's gonna happen, you know? And same with, you know, when you go down the organic aisle at the grocery store and, you know, you're super concerned and you wanna buy food that's healthy and you wanna buy food that's gonna support fat loss because you need to lose this weight and you're so frustrated. And so you see all the things with gluten-free, right? Gluten-free, that's a big one. Gluten-free, dairy-free, you know, all natural. And you're like, phew, okay, I can buy these. Well, I had a client, literally, and if you've made this mistake, I mean, it happens. And this is why I'm calling it out right now. I had a client who we were doing a detox. She'd just come in to see me. We started out with like just a 10-day whole food detox, kind of cutting out inflammatory foods, getting things ready to go into like the next phase of learning how to eat and balance the macros for the activity like we're talking about. And so she came in and she was so excited. She'd gone shopping and she'd bought all of this food that was dairy-free and gluten-free. And, you know, instead of whole foods like we talked about, and, you know, I put down, you know, lists and meal plans, she bought Oreos. Because Oreos are dairy-free and they're gluten-free and they're vegan. Oreos, right? Like, this is what it says on a package of Oreos now, because they know if they write that, there's a little ping that goes off in the back of your head that says, this has got to be healthy, right? Like, this is a healthier choice. because we know these words that are kind of all floating around, and we don't really know what they mean, and we don't really know why it matters, but we know it matters. And so this is the stuff that you're up against now, right? When you're going out into the grocery store and you're trying to find fat loss foods. Like, oh, look, dairy-free, gluten-free. Never mind, again, that it's all processed carbohydrates, and again, it's all sugar, and it's just all coming to an insulin spike and fat storage. But it's only like, what, 100 calories for 2 cookies, and it's gluten-free and dairy-free. So these are the basics, right? These are the things that you need to be aware of, and it's a lot. I get it. It's a lot. It's super confusing. There's so much out there. I get that. I had to go back to school to learn this stuff, and then after that, I still didn't know enough, and then I had to spend another year or two researching and taking other courses before I actually got this stuff, and before this stuff started to make sense, and I was able to put programs together and to actually figure out how to lose fat. Like, it's complicated. So if you have questions, that's what these Wednesday nights are for. That's what these lives are for. So if you have questions, feel free to type it in the chat with this stuff. If you have, a specific food you're wondering if it's fat loss friendly, if I'm just making sure that there's no comments on here. I'm not seeing any, but sometimes Facebook hides them. So if you have questions about all that stuff, type it in here, because this is the time of year where we all start to pay really close attention to it again, right? Like this is like I said at the beginning, this is like the second New Year's. September is a huge month when it comes to health and wellness, which is amazing. We want to kind of reset after that summer. We start caring again. In the summer, we're kind of like, oh, it's summer, summer mindset, lots of treats, lots of cocktails. Like, I'm no different. Summer's always loose and free for me and my family, and that's fine. That's great, right? We've got to live and eat and work with the seasons. That's really, really important, actually, for balance and to have real life. So by all means, enjoy this last weekend of summer. Go into Labor Day weekend, with the intent to just relax, have fun, not stress about food. But, if in the back of your head you want to get back on track, you're like, this is it, that's where I'm at now. I'm like, okay, I've got Labor Day weekend, we're gonna have a great time, gonna have cocktails, we're gonna go to the lake, it's gonna be amazing. And then when those kids go back to school on Tuesday, I am back in routine. I am back to the foods I know feel great. I'm back to, knowing exactly what I'm doing every day. So being able to plan out lunches and breakfasts and dinners, and if I'm gonna need snacks or whatnot, right? I'm so excited to get back to that. So if you are too, then just rewind a little bit. Let's go back to basics. Let's just start with those kind of things, right? Let's just look at what foods are gonna work. Let's just, not be taken in by the health washing. Let's not do any of that. And let's just kind of breathe and take it one step at a time. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's helpful. I'm gonna have another cocktail. Well, another cocktail. I'm gonna have a sip of my cocktail, aka Chardonnay, which is only 2 or 3 grams of sugar per liter, so we're good. And if you guys have any questions, go ahead and type them in now. I know we went off on a little segue there on how type 2 diabetes works, which I find really interesting. Patty says, if talking about diet, you might want to stress that this doesn't mean cutting calories to 1,000 or lower. Yeah, totally. So Kathy is one of my favorite clients on here. So she is super active in our private client community and in the free community, and she knows her stuff now. She has been working so hard. She has been nailing this whole, learn how food works and learn how fat loss works, and I love it so much. So she's bang on, right? Calories, in the sense of cutting them, doesn't matter. Yes, if you were eating 2,000 extra calories a day than what you need, yeah, you're gonna store extra fat, because it's the laws of, physics state that, right? Energy is neither created nor destroyed, right? So yes, but at the end of the day, your body changes dramatically and compensates dramatically when it comes to the amount of energy you're taking in. So cutting calories doesn't work. In fact, one of the biggest pests, one of the biggest things, biggest issues I have with women who, are just starting out working with me is that they literally aren't eating enough. And so weight loss can be slow, or maybe it's stalled. And then we look and it's they're eating 1,000 calories a day. like that, your body will not burn fat at 1,000 calories a day because your body thinks it's gonna die, right? Like it thinks it's dying at 1,000 calories a day. So it's gonna slow everything down. You know, your digestion goes to hell. You're not making enough stomach acid anymore because these are secondary processes and they get dialed right down, right? Like all of this stuff is happening on the back end to make sure you don't die. And it makes it almost impossible to lose weight. And so you see this a lot with people, women who've been dieting forever, right? Is that over time your metabolism is just so low and so damaged that it takes a long time to actually be able to get it back up and functioning on a semi-regular level again. And so that is a huge component. So yeah, that's amazing. That's another one of the basics, eat enough. So the basics, know that fat loss is hormonal, okay? It doesn't really have much to do with calories. It has more to do with the types of food and what that causes when it comes to blood sugar, and then in part when it comes to hormones, because that's all interconnected. That's huge. And then the other side of it is don't fall for the crap on labels, right? Like at the end of the day, when it comes to fat loss, terms like gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, organic, natural, doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. And so if you treat it like that and you know that, then I think that's gonna be hugely helpful. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to come back here every Wednesday night. I'm here every Wednesday night at 8 anyways. But over the next few weeks, I'm going to try to go back and do some of this kind of basic stuff for you guys. You know, we'll talk, you can ask me your questions and you can send me, you know, topics you'd like to see covered, which is great. You know, we're going to go over things like, you know, how you're sabotaging yourself if you're doing certain types of exercise. We can come to stress and stress eating and, you know, cortisol and what that does to blood sugar and fat storage. And, you know, we can talk a little bit more about macros if you guys want to, or, you know, any of the questions you have, we can answer. If any of you, you know, want to do a hot seat, like if any of you want to come on, with me, and maybe we can figure out how to do that. If you want to give me some meal plans or tell me what you've been eating and you want me to critique them and to kind of do that live, we could do that. You can just send me a message and we can talk about how that could work. But yeah, that's the whole point over the next few weeks is let's get that reset button pushed if that's what you're after. Let's get you into September in the best way possible. You know, let's set you up for success so you actually, you know, can go into that holiday season feeling amazing, right? You can go into seeing all the people you haven't seen in a while and you can feel really pumped about like the progress you've made since last year when you said you were going to make all that progress. So if there's no other questions, I'm just going to make sure that there's no other questions. I don't think there are any other questions. I am going to end it here. It's 8:28, so I think it's a good time to end it. We've been on for about half an hour. Thank you guys for joining me, for coming on, you know, for giving me your time and listening to what I had to say. I'm super passionate about this stuff. So I really hope that you got something out of the last half an hour. If you're joining me on the replay and you have questions, just type them in the chat. I will always answer them. I always come back and check just to make sure everything goes the way that you want it to go. That's it for tonight. Have a great Labor Day weekend, everybody. The next time we chat, kids will be back at school. And we'll be starting the whole fall thing, which is crazy. So have a great night. We will talk soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.